doesn't matter which level you are at, you have a choice whether you want to be ordinary or you want to be extraordinary. So I thought I'd share stories of 3 Toastmasters I've met on my journey who have truly inspired me and who I've never forgotten. And I'm hoping that something in their story resonates with you. The first is a man by the name of Emil. He joined probably about the same time I did. And Emil was a tall guy with, enormous hands and the biggest smile that you could imagine. If he walked into the room and smiled, it's like the whole world lit up. He was an ordinary guy who wanted to improve his ability to communicate. And if I tell you, well, first of all, let me ask you, and I'm sure that you know the answer to this question, how much time do you have to deliver your icebreaker? And most of you know the answer. It's between 4 and 6 minutes. Well, Emil didn't take between 4 and 6 minutes. He took an agonizingly slow 16 minutes to deliver his icebreaker. And it wasn't because he hadn't read the brief for the project. It wasn't because he didn't understand. It was because he had a profound stutter. And for him to get words out was exceptionally difficult. But he was unafraid. And that's what I loved about Emil. He knew he had a problem with stuttering, and he had the courage to reach out for help and to come to a Toastmasters club. And his club were ordinary people like you and I. Imagine listening to an icebreaker that took 16 minutes to deliver. And imagine the feeling that you'd have, that you're just willing him on, cheering him on, hoping he could get the next word out. And at the end of that icebreaker, I wasn't in the room, but I bet you he got a standing ovation because of his courage and his commitment and his determination. I watched Emil over the years, and he went from being an ordinary member who happened to inspire everybody from the very first day. He went on to take on roles in his club meetings. He went on to become a club officer. I watched him become club president. He then went on to become area director. And a few years after I first met him, Emil was our division director. And I saw him at club officer training, speaking to an audience of about 70 people and charming us, informing us, making us laugh, keeping us captivated. And he hardly stuttered. And I thought he was extraordinary. But he became extraordinary not just through his own efforts and his own determination to do well. He became extraordinary because of his fellow club members, because of his fellow club officers, his mentors, who were there to support him every step of the way. So I've never forgotten Emil. He's somebody I still think of often, and I think if Emil can do it, I can do it. The second story I want to share with you is a lady called Rosa. I was invited to become a mentor for a brand new club in Cape Town. And it was a small company, a corporate club, and they were a financial advisory company. So they managed wealth on behalf of their clients. And the lady from HR who had started the club opened the membership up to anyone in the company. So obviously you had the admin people, you had the client-facing people, many of whom who had multiple degrees to their name, exceptionally learned people. And then you had someone like Rosa, and Rosa joined the club, and she was very familiar with the boardroom. But Rosa was familiar with the boardroom because she's the one who brought the tea and coffee and served the lunches. I'm not even sure whether she finished high school, but she saw an opportunity. And she decided to grab that opportunity and to become a Toastmaster. And as I was mentoring the club over probably at least 6 months, I watched her grow. And she was fascinating to listen to because her background that she came from was very different to the background I came from. So I learned a lot by listening to her stories of how she grew up and what happens in her community. And the day I will never forget when in my eyes, Rosa became extraordinary was when she was an evaluator to one of these client-facing executives with multiple degrees to his name. And she stood there, someone who perhaps didn't have a high school diploma, and she added value to this guy by giving him feedback, constructive feedback that he could use to improve his next speech. And I thought she was extraordinary. I loved the fact that her club gave her the opportunity to welcome her as a Toastmaster and to learn from her, even though her background was very different to everybody else in the company. But she inspired me as well. The third person whose story I wanted to share with you is somebody from my own club, a guy by the name of Tom. Tom was a very nice guy, super to talk to, and he shared with me, I became his mentor in the club, that he had turned down multiple promotions at work because that next step up the corporate ladder would have meant he needed to do presentations. And he was terrified of doing presentations. He was also convinced that he was probably one of the worst presenters in the world. So he turned down promotions to avoid being up on stage and presenting to anybody. So Tom and I started working together, and I started helping him prepare his speeches. And he had a wonderful sense of humor. And the funny thing happened. Almost every time he presented, he was voted the best speaker of the evening. And no one was more surprised than Tom himself, because in his own mind, he didn't see that he had any talent to speak in front of an audience. But he also pushed through. He asked for help. He became courageous and did things that made him uncomfortable. And the happiest day for me was when we had a new member join. Her name was Elise. And Elise came, and we said what we would say to all our new members: would you like a mentor? And she said yes. And I said, well, have you got anybody specific in mind? Is there somebody in the club that you'd like to be mentored by? And she said, I'd like Tom to be my mentor. And I had the wonderful, happy privilege of calling Tom and saying, Tom, guess what? You have been specifically requested to be Elise's mentor. So when I reflect on these stories, what comes true to me when I think of Emile and Rosa and Tom, not one of them was prepared to settle for the status quo. They were looking for opportunities, even though those opportunities may have made them exceptionally uncomfortable. They were prepared to reach out for help and be mentored and to grow. And in the process, they improved probably beyond their wildest expectations, and they became inspirational to other people. So when we reflect on what it takes to go from being ordinary to extraordinary, as a club, as a member, as a leader, there are a couple of things that come to mind for me. It's easier for us to see the extraordinary in other people. We can easily look to someone sitting next to us and say, you are really good at this, or I see exceptional quality in that. But when we look at ourselves, we have a habit of trivializing our own superpowers. And we think, oh, it's nothing. You know, somebody says to me, you're good at something. Oh, it's nothing. It is not nothing. You have a talent. You have a God-given talent. You have an ability that other people don't have. They come to you for help in that area. And that's to be celebrated. And that's to be shared, because it's a gift you can give to other people. So when you look at yourself, be kind to yourself and just celebrate who you are. Celebrate what you can do that other people perhaps struggle to do. And that is the first part of being extraordinary, is shining a light on what it is that you do that adds value. And consider it a gift. You're not being arrogant. You're not being, you're not kind of being selfish by saying, I'm good at something. It's a gift because your ability can help to solve a problem. So celebrate what you are good at. The barriers to us becoming extraordinary is, number one, not recognizing the extraordinary in ourselves and others. Number two, it is not speaking about it, not sharing it, keeping it under kind of hidden away and not being prepared to share it with others. The moment you can share it with others, it multiplies. So when someone comes to you and says, wouldn't you like to be a club officer? Don't say, oh, no, I can't. I'm too busy. I haven't got the talents. Say, yes, I can. This is how I can help. And that's how you start that journey to becoming extraordinary, by being willing to share what it is that you've been given as a talent and a gift. We also need to celebrate the extraordinary, celebrate the small things that people do. Some people can be extraordinary by arriving early and helping set the room up for the meeting. Somebody can be extraordinary by welcoming guests. Another person can be extraordinary by saying, guys, this meeting was good, but we can do better next time, by holding us to account, by holding us to a higher standard. There are multiple ways you can be extraordinary, and we need you to be extraordinary, because you in turn inspire others. Settling for the status quo, or settling for the average, or meh, it's okay, you know, we don't have to be perfect, that is stifling the extraordinary. So don't settle for average. Always believe that you and your club and your team can do better, and challenge yourselves to do better. And so much of the extraordinary is wrapped up in our dreams. So Anatolia Toastmasters had a dream of becoming a successful Toastmasters club, not just in their first year, but 10 years from now. So never give up on those dreams, because in those dreams lie the extraordinary. And the more extraordinary you are, the more your guests want to come to your meetings, your members want to come to meetings, and guests want to become members. So I want to share some steps for you to become extraordinary as an individual, as a team, as a club. The first thing is to believe in your future self. Have a vision of who you want to become, and hold that vision. Think about it, speak about it, define it, and chase that dream of becoming the person that is so much better than you are today, because that's how all of us grow. Speak into that possibility. We have a member in our club who, in South Africa, we often have a tradition at the beginning of our meetings, we'll raise a glass and say to South Africa and her people, but our club president a few years ago said, no, let's toast the #1 club. We are the #1 club. And we weren't the #1 club, but he believed we could become the #1 club. So at the beginning of every meeting, we remind ourselves that that is our vision, to become the #1 club, and to think and act as if we already are a #1 club. And that simple reminder at the beginning of every meeting is quite powerful. Take action often. If we want to grow and we want to become extraordinary, we have to keep taking action. And often that action will make us a little bit uncomfortable, or sometimes a lot uncomfortable. But that's where the growth is. And support one another through that discomfort. Support one another in that growth, because it's a team sport. It's not a spectator sport. You have to get into the arena yourself. You have to be willing to take action. And that's how each one of us becomes extraordinary. Somebody once said to me, create a movie in your head and imagine that future self of yours already having accomplished whatever it is you're dreaming about. And imagine what it will feel like to be that person, to be that person who has achieved so much and given so much and inspired so many other people. And instead of rehearsing why you can't do it, play that video in your head and rehearse it as if it's already done. And it's a very powerful way of motivating yourself and others around you. And never forget to celebrate one another and celebrate each step on the way. So let's think back on the stories that I shared with you. Emil, Rosa, Tom. They didn't settle for the status quo. They weren't willing to be average. They were chasing a dream, even though it was quite uncomfortable for them in different ways. And they were willing to become uncomfortable, and they got help. They got mentors. They joined a Toastmasters club. They participated frequently and actively. They asked for help. They asked for mentorship, and they became extraordinary. As ordinary as they were, they became extraordinary. As ordinary as that club was that each one of them joined, they became extraordinary as they supported those individuals in their journey of growth. So now I have a challenge for you. Now it's your turn. Those of you that are in the room together, I invite you to choose somebody else in the room and to take a piece of paper and to write down on that piece of paper their name and why, in your opinion, they are extraordinary. Those of you that are online, if you know some of the other people online, send them a message in the chat. Tell them why they are extraordinary in your opinion. Celebrate them. And the second part of this exercise is to take a piece of paper for those of you that are in the room and even those of you that are online, and take a separate piece of paper and write your own name on the top. And write down why you are extraordinary in your opinion. And don't be shy. This is not the time for modesty. This is time to celebrate who you are, to celebrate your gifts. And write down why you are extraordinary. And take that piece of paper and keep it close. Look at it often, remind yourself, because we have to be kind to ourselves and we have to recognize the extraordinary in ourselves and in those around us. So there was a quote by someone called David Sachs, and he said, being extraordinary isn't reserved for the rich, the famous, the powerful, or the privileged. Being extraordinary is available to each one of us, even in the most seemingly ordinary of lives. So that means it's you and me. Wherever we are, whoever we are, we have the potential to be extraordinary, not only for the benefit that we ourselves can get out of it, but for the benefit of those around us. And Toastmasters is an extraordinary community of ordinary people who become extraordinary. And in turn, they help each one of us become better than we were when we walked in the door. So Anatolia Toastmasters and all the other Toastmasters clubs that are here tonight, I salute you. I celebrate you. I'm grateful for you because you are the reason many people joined, and you are the reason many more people will join. And you are the reason many people leave inspired to become something more than they are today, tomorrow, the next day. So for all of you, happy celebrations. It's wonderful to be part of your celebration this evening. I apologize in advance for not being able to stay for your whole meeting, but I know that we've got some time for Q&A. So I'm going to hand it over to those who are handling the Q&A, and they will tell us how much time we've got for any questions you might have.
Yes, thank you very much, Aletta, for this inspiring speech. And once again, we think about our vision, to set our goals, and to understand what we really want. Thank you very much for your speech. Yes, please share your questions if you have to Aletta. And I would like to let me. He's going to take the question. Sorry, I forget the name. Someone from us will collect all questions, gather all questions. Who will be the Kamil? Is it you?
3 people to manage this Q&A session. For those who are in the room, as I mentioned before, I put some ballots on your seats. You can write your question to the ballots, and Kamil will be collecting those questions. First of all, thank you so much. And our first question is, how did your Toastmasters journey begin?
Well, as I shared, I was running away from my children. I wanted something that was just for me, that had nothing to do with being a wife and a mom. And I'd heard about Toastmasters, but I'd never met a Toastmaster. I'd never gone to a meeting, but one day I decided, let me find out. And I went to a club that was, convenient for me to go to. And when I arrived, nobody really made me feel particularly welcome. They had just finished running a speechcraft course, and they were talking to all the people who'd completed the speechcraft course. But the minute that meeting started, I knew this was a place I could learn. I was so impressed by the people who spoke that evening. And I knew that I wanted to be as articulate as them, to be able to make people laugh, to persuade them. So the quality of that meeting was what hooked me from day one. And I'm still a member of that club, gosh, I forget how many years later, 15 years later, and I'm still learning every time I go to a meeting. So I'm very grateful that I happened to go to a quality club with a quality meeting, and I was hooked.
Thank you. Let's see the other question.
We have one.
Where should I start? Good evening and good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be here and I'm honored to listen to the first Vice President, Aletta Rochat. And it's a pleasure for us to have you and listen to you for our celebration day. And there is one question from Rochat. She asks, I listened how to improve transitioning between sentences, and I noticed you are like memorizing how did you reach to this level?
With a lot of help from fellow Toastmasters. When we start off in Toastmasters, we're all at different levels. It doesn't matter what level you are when you begin. But what happened for me was, even though I was very confident, I was terrified of my first evaluation because I'd never been evaluated in public before and I had no idea what to expect. But each evaluation made me aware of something that I could improve on. And I'll never forget one grammarian, one meeting. We combined the R counter and the grammarian. And she stood up and gave her report and she said to me, Aletta, well done. No ums and ahs, fantastic. She says, but you used the word now 14 times in your speech. And I was totally unaware that I had this habit of saying now this, now that, and beginning a sentence with now. But that feedback helped me grow. I've still got lots of problems. There are lots of things I don't do perfectly, like all of us. I tend to string sentences together and not often pause between sentences. So we all have things that we continue to work on. We'll never reach perfection, and perfection is not the goal. But it is just continuous improvements, always volunteering for something. My kind of yardstick, if I can use that word, is at every meeting I need to speak in some capacity as a speaker, evaluator, table topics, anything, because each time I speak, I get the opportunity to learn and I ask for feedback. So it's a continuous journey for every single one of us. And the more you do it, and leadership, by the way, being a club officer gives you more opportunities to speak. And I found that when I became a club officer, my learning accelerated. So I encourage you to take that on because you won't just learn leadership skills, your speaking will also improve as a result.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Here, there's another question. Where do you usually refill your energy and how?
Can you repeat that, please?
Where do you usually refill your energy and how?
Okay, so if I'm interpreting that question correctly, where do I get my energy from and how? I believe that each one of us has to find ways, I call it feeding your soul. So if I'm stressed, my best way to get rid of that anxiety and tension and to re-energize myself is to go for a run. I don't run particularly fast, but I enjoy running, or go for a walk or be in nature. That works for me. Even just going outside for 15 minutes can really help me re-energize. I try and be very mindful of what I allow into my space. So I've happen to wake up early every morning easily. It's not a chore for me. And I dedicate the first half an hour of my day to trying to read something positive, listening to something that's positive, to doing some meditation. And I find when I do that, so much else comes right. If I neglect that and I neglect myself, the tension builds, and then often you don't cope as well. So to be a leader, you need to have something to give. To have something to give, you've got to make sure you nurture yourself. So find something that you love doing, whether it's listening to music, going for a walk, spending time with a friend, doing a crossword puzzle. It doesn't matter what it is. Something that allows you to unwind, to relax, to recharge yourself, so that when you do interface with people at work or at home or in Toastmasters, you've got some positive energy. But for me, nature is very important and exercise is very important.
Thank you. You're a very successful coach. How did you develop yourself for this succession?
It wasn't planned. It was all because I became a Toastmaster. I often say it was an unintended consequence of becoming a Toastmaster. What happened was I joined, I became a member. Then the club president came to me one day and she said, our VPPR, our PR manager for the club, has had to step away. Can you do it? And I just said yes without understanding what I needed to do, but I was willing to learn. And I did that. And I remember getting a call one day and somebody said, you know, my boss, he's looking for help with public speaking. And I said, well, come along to our meeting, told them when and where, etc. And this lady said, he's too busy. Can't you help him? So I thought, oh, okay. And I said yes. Again, had no idea what I was getting into, but he became my very first client. And I discovered I enjoyed coaching someone to improve their presentation skills. And word got out, other people heard about what I was doing, so I got more and more clients. And then as time went on, I discovered I not only liked coaching, I loved coaching. And I went on to get a certification in public speaking coaching. And I've also done other certifications in other types of coaching. So it wasn't planned at all, but it was through my experience at Toastmasters that I discovered that I had the ability to coach others, and I discovered that I loved it, and then it ended up becoming a business. But it's all thanks to Toastmasters.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you very much. Another question from Miss Eve Kellam. She's asked you, when was the aha moment when you discovered the extraordinary inside you? Mm-hmm. When was the aha moment when you discovered the extraordinary inside you?
That's such a lovely question. I guess there could be many. Sometimes it's what other people say to you. And as I've gone on my coaching journey, I always talk to people about their superpowers. And I say each one of us has got superpowers, we've got strengths. And one day my husband said to me, your superpower is helping other people feel better about themselves. And that was one of the many aha moments. And one of my personal core values is that whatever I do has to make a difference to make other people's lives better. I believe in making a difference. And ever since I was a child, I've always raised my hand to be on committees, to be on teams, to be part of the solution. I enjoy it. And when I was at boarding school, every time I raised my hand, I got to leave the hostel and have an adventure. So I've always been one who believes that raise your hand first, figure out what to do later, but opportunity comes after you raise your hand. So I think my aha moment was just realizing that something I did impacted other people. And when we talk about coaching, when I see my clients have success as a result of the coaching that I've worked with them on, that is the best reward ever. Because then I feel I have made a positive difference and I see them grow in confidence. And other people have done that for me. And it's just a joy to be able to pass that on to other people.
You have mentioned challenges in your speech. Can you share a challenging experience from one of your speaking engagements and how you navigated it?
Gosh, so many come to mind. When I was a region advisor on one of my district visits, I happened to go to Zimbabwe. And at the time, there was a lot of conflict in the district, and there were different teams that had different opinions of how things should be done. So the district director at the time asked me if I would go and run a session to try and clear up the conflict. So we did a session where everybody got a chance to speak and be heard, and everybody had to listen to everybody else. And of course, they were able to say what was on their mind, but also listen to how other people perceived it. And as I took them through a process for conflict resolution, then we got to the point where we said, okay, can we now agree the way forward? And one of the problems was that all the negativity was being expressed in a WhatsApp group. And that WhatsApp group wasn't just open to members, it was open to people outside of Toastmasters. So it wasn't doing the brand any good either. So we came to an agreement that we would not, I always say, don't type about conflict, don't text about conflict. If you've got conflict with someone, speak to them about it, talk about it, face to face ideally, but don't put it in the written word. It's just a downward spiral. So we came to the end of that session and everybody seemed to have agreed a new way. And I felt proud that I'd been able to guide everyone through this. And the very next morning, the WhatsApp group started again with a criticism. And I was so disappointed that even though we'd reached agreement in person, that agreement hadn't been carried through. What I learned from that is that sometimes you can only do so much. You can share your opinion, you can share wisdom, you can share a process that'll work, but people have to choose to follow it or take advantage of it. And ultimately, when it comes to conflict, even if you are the mediator, it's not your conflict to resolve. It belongs to the people who are involved in it, and they have to choose to want to resolve it. And that was a hard lesson because sometimes we wish things would be easier. We wish that we could fix something and it will stay fixed, but that's human nature. We don't always stay static. But it's a humbling experience to be asked to be a mediator. It's even more humbling to realize that your contribution is a part of the puzzle. It's not the whole puzzle. But it's also good to remember that you don't have to solve it all. Other people have ownership of their actions and their beliefs in that moment and concerning that issue. So that's one of the challenges that comes to mind, where my speaking, I hoped it was a solution, and it was a partial solution, but not quite the outcome I'd hoped for.
Thank you. Also, the most common path in our division is presentation mastery. And now we have a question for presentations. In your opinion, what distinguishes a truly impactful and memorable presentation?
For me, it's all about telling a story. We're all different. We come from different cultures, different backgrounds. There's so much that is different about us, but there are certain storylines that are what I call a universal hope, a universal fear. It's something that we all share. So if I talk about the frustrations of being in traffic, you'll know exactly what I mean, irrespective of where you live. If I talk about being scared because I want something for my children that'll keep them safe, that's a universal hope and fear all rolled into one. So when a story is your story, it's personal. In other words, only you can tell it. And you take us into that story and describe some of the characters just enough that we get a picture of them in our minds. But the story has to have a purpose. And the best stories are the ones where I can relate to something in the story. So if we're talking about, the story of Emile, I've shared that many times, and that story seems to resonate with people, not because they all stutter, but because they've all had something that they struggle with and they need support for, and they hope they can overcome. So the stories that are about real people and your real experience told in a simple way, and I believe in conversational storytelling. So just take me along with you, take me into the scene, give me enough details that I can appreciate it and picture the scene. And then in that story, there's usually a moment where something happens to the hero, there's a resolution of conflict, there's a celebration. Those are all just part of the storyline. And the more you watch other people who are good at telling stories, listen to how they tell those stories, and then start experimenting with that. And then you'll find one or two stories that really resonate with the audience. And one of mine that I share is when I took my son, who was about 8 years old, to his first judo tournament. And I'll give you the very short version of it. I knew nothing about judo. He knew very little about judo. He was incredibly enthusiastic, but he wasn't very competent. And me as a mother was sitting there watching these kids fight, and I could see he was out of his depth. And as a mother, I wanted to take him home because I wanted to protect him. And in the corner, there was the paramedics in case something went wrong. And I was deeply uncomfortable with this, because if something goes wrong, what do they say? What was the mother thinking? It always comes back to the mother. So I tried my very persuasive best, and I said to him, Trevor, my boy, these kids are really good. I'm scared you'll get hurt. I think we should go home. Let's go to McDonald's on the way home. And normally the word McDonald's would have moved heaven and earth for this child. He loved McDonald's. But that little boy in his judo suit folded his arms, looked me in the eye, and stamped his foot. And he said, I don't want to go home. I want to stay and fight. And I mean, how can you argue against that? And off he went and fought, and he came back and he wasn't injured. And I was delighted. We were packing up to go home, and we heard his name on the loudspeaker. And I thought, oh no, don't tell me he's got to fight again. And then it turned out, because I knew nothing about judo and neither did he, the kids fought in weight categories. And in his weight category, he got the bronze medal. And he was elated. And of course, I only found out afterwards, there were only 3 kids in that category. But he was so elated with that bronze medal, he didn't take it off for 2 weeks. But the purpose of that story is not just about the judo tournament. It's about what I learned about myself as a mother. That even though I had his best intentions at heart, trying to protect him, I was stifling him. And he grew far more because he was willing to take the risk than he would have if he listened to me and went to McDonald's. So that's an illustration of a story that's got wisdom attached to it that other people can take and learn from, even though it's your personal story. So just experiment with stories, listen to people who tell good stories, and just keep trying to tell them yourself, because it makes for compelling listening. And most people love listening to stories.
Thank you so much for sharing this inspiring story. Do we have any other questions?
Well, actually, yes, we have. Aletta, we have been talking about challenges, finding your path, and being a speaker. What are your ways of celebrating extraordinary members' accomplishments instead of saying you are doing great?
So I believe as a leader, one of the most powerful tools that you have at your disposal to build teams that thrive, to get extraordinary results, is wrapped up in validation. So most of us go through our day, and we're lucky if someone thanks us for what we do. So often we work really hard and no one notices or no one says anything. But as a leader, I have found that the more you validate and make a habit of validating people, the more you can celebrate their accomplishments, and the more they will be motivated to work even harder. And the ways I find work best for validation, obviously face-to-face, it must be authentic. Don't pretend, and don't give a compliment where it's not warranted. You have to give a reason for whatever you're complimenting them about. I love the way you ask the difficult questions. Thank you for keeping us on time. Thank you for making sure that everybody understood that point before we moved on. Whatever it is, I often send a voice note because people don't expect voice notes. And if you can get into a voice note on WhatsApp, That's so much better than getting in someone's inbox, which is wrapped up in work. So I've just tried to make a habit of finding reasons to validate other people. And that grows them as a person. It makes them aware of what they're good at. It builds team spirit, and it also increases productivity, in my opinion. So I hope that answered the question. But that to me is one of the easiest ways to celebrate the extraordinary and build up the team spirit and productivity all wrapped into one.
I appreciate it for those detailed answers. I think I'm sorry, all questions we have.
Natam, do we have any other?
Let's see. No, I don't.
Okay, I have one last question. You suggested us to write ourselves, our names, and what makes us extraordinary. Now, I'm curious, what makes Aletta extraordinary?
Oh, that's a very good question to ask a presenter who's just asked the audience to do something like that. If I had to write that today, I would say, Aletta, what makes you extraordinary is that you have the ability to take something that you've learned, to break it down into steps, and to share that technique and that process with other people so that they can more quickly and easily figure out how to do something and get success from that process. It's something I use continuously in my coaching. I believe coaching has to be very practical. So when I meet with clients, I'll give them a process to follow. It's not a flow chart. It's not a model. It's do this, think about that. Last night I was doing a coaching call with clients, and we did one which was about celebrating what we'd achieved this year, reflecting on how it had gone, and course correcting. And part of that was, number one, celebrate what has gone right and be generous. Even the small things, just write them all down. The second thing is to reflect on why did things go so well? Was there a pattern of behavior? Was there a belief that you had again and again? Was there an action you took? And circle the ones that were game changers, because inevitably they are things that you did differently than you've ever done before, and that led to the progress, which led to the celebration. And then after you've done that, think about, is there anything that I've almost finished, not quite, it's still work in progress. And what do I need to do to complete that so I can celebrate that? And then it is, what got in the way of your success this year? And that could be a limiting belief. It could be an excuse that you always say, oh, I'm too busy, sorry, can't do it. It could be that you didn't prioritize the right things. There's many excuses that we all make. What could you have done better, and what patterns of behavior underlie that? I discovered for myself when I did this exercise that one of the things that holds me back is when I try something new, I want to be an expert before I do it. So it means I spend a lot of time and sometimes money trying to learn a skill before I put it into practice. And that holds me back. It's a plus in some ways because I don't go in without doing research, but sometimes it slows me down. And again, you're looking for patterns of behavior that you need to change. And then the question to ask is, what are your non-negotiables for next year? What can you improve? Just 1%, maybe 2% on a regular basis that would take you forward, and then create an action plan of this week, this month, the next 3 months. So that's an example of a process I came up with as I reflected on my own journey this year. And I was able to decode it and package it and share it with others. So that is what I would be celebrating if I were to write that card for myself today. Thank you for that wonderful question.
Thank you for your answer. It was an honor to listen to you and asking questions to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aletta. Sorry.
Yeah,
Please
thank
go
you,
ahead.
and enjoy the celebration, and keep going. I'm sure that before I can blink, Anatolia Toastmasters and many of the other Toastmasters clubs that are here are going to be presidents distinguished and more, and change the lives of so many other people as you help them become extraordinary. So I wish you every success, and thank you for inviting me to be part of your celebration this evening. Thank you.